What if the biggest obstacle standing between you and the life you want isn't lack of opportunity, talent, or resources? What if it's something far more personal and far more fixable? The brutal truth is this: most people are their own worst enemy. They sabotage their success, settle for less than they deserve, and live their entire lives playing small because they don't believe they're worthy of more. But here's what the most successful, confident, and fulfilled people understand that 99% of the population doesn't. Loving yourself isn't selfish. It's strategic. It's not about feeling good. It's about performing at your highest level. And it's not about self-indulgence. It's about self-investment. In this audiobook, you're going to discover why self-love is the ultimate competitive advantage, how to rewire your brain for unshakable self-worth, and most importantly, how to love yourself enough to actually level up. Because when you truly value yourself, you stop accepting mediocrity. You stop tolerating toxic situations. You stop making excuses. And you start making moves that honor the person you're becoming, not the person you used to be. Chapter 1. The Self-sabotage Epidemic. Here's a reality that will shock you. 95% of people are unconsciously programmed to destroy their own success. They work toward goals while simultaneously undermining their progress. They say they want better but consistently choose behaviors that keep them stuck. They dream of transformation while clinging to the very habits and beliefs that created their current reality. This isn't laziness. This isn't lack of motivation. This is self-sabotage, and it's an epidemic. Self-sabotage isn't obvious. It doesn't announce itself. It disguises itself as logic, as being realistic, as protecting yourself from disappointment. But make no mistake, every time you procrastinate on something important, every time you choose the comfortable path when you know the challenging path would serve you better, every time you dim your own light to make others comfortable, you are engaging in self-sabotage. And the root cause isn't what most people think. The neuroscience of self-sabotage reveals something profound. Your brain is wired to keep you safe, not to make you successful. The same neural pathways that once protected your ancestors from physical danger now protect you from emotional discomfort. When you try to level up, when you attempt to step outside your comfort zone, your brain interprets this as a threat. It floods your system with stress hormones, creates doubt, manufactures excuses, and pulls you back to what feels familiar, even if what feels familiar is keeping you stuck. But here's what's even more insidious. Your brain doesn't just sabotage your actions, it sabotages your identity. It whispers things like, "Who do you think you are?" And "People like you don't achieve that level of success." And "You're not smart enough, talented enough, worthy enough." These aren't random thoughts. They're defense mechanisms designed to keep you in your current reality, because your current reality feels safe, even if it's suffocating. The most dangerous form of self-sabotage is what psychologists call upper limiting. This is when you unconsciously create problems or make poor decisions right when things start going well. You finally start making progress in your career, and suddenly you create conflict with your boss. You begin to see results from your fitness routine, and then you binge eat for a week. You meet someone amazing, and then you sabotage the relationship with neediness or distance. This happens because deep down, You don't believe you deserve the good things that are happening. Understanding the psychology behind this is crucial. Your sense of self-worth acts like a thermostat. Just like a thermostat maintains a set temperature, your self-worth maintains a set level of success, happiness, and fulfillment that you believe you deserve. When external circumstances exceed your internal thermostat setting, you unconsciously bring yourself back down to your comfort zone. This is why lottery winners often end up broke, why people in amazing relationships sabotage them, and why individuals who achieve rapid success sometimes spiral back to where they started. The programming that creates this thermostat setting begins in childhood. Every interaction, every message you received about your worth, every time you were criticized, praised, ignored, or celebrated created neural pathways that now dictate how much success, love, and happiness you allow yourself to experience. If you were raised in an environment where you had to earn love through achievement, you might sabotage success because part of you fears that without the struggle, you won't be worthy of love. If you grew up feeling invisible or unimportant, you might sabotage opportunities to be seen because visibility feels dangerous. But here's the empowering truth. What was programmed can be reprogrammed. The same neuroplasticity that locked you into patterns of self-sabotage can free you from them. However, this requires something most people aren't willing to do. It requires you to love yourself enough to confront the uncomfortable truth about why you've been holding yourself back. It requires you to love yourself enough to do the deep work of rewiring your internal programming. And most importantly, it requires you to love yourself enough to believe that you deserve better and then act accordingly. The first step in breaking free from self-sabotage is awareness. You must become conscious of the subtle ways you undermine yourself. Start paying attention to the voice in your head when you're about to take action that could improve your life. Notice what happens in your body when you consider stepping outside your comfort zone. Observe the excuses your mind creates when opportunities for growth present themselves. This awareness is not about judging yourself. It's about understanding the unconscious patterns that have been running your life. The second step is understanding that self-sabotage is not a character flaw. It's a protection mechanism that has outlived its usefulness. Your brain learned to sabotage your success in an attempt to protect you from pain, rejection, or failure. But what once served to protect you is now preventing you from becoming who you're capable of being. You must retrain your brain to understand that growth, success, and leveling up are not threats to be avoided but goals to be embraced. Breaking free from self-sabotage requires you to love yourself enough to tolerate temporary discomfort for long-term transformation. It means loving yourself enough to sit with anxiety instead of choosing comfort. It means loving yourself enough to risk failure instead of guaranteeing mediocrity. And it means loving yourself enough to believe that you deserve to succeed at the highest level, even when your past programming tells you otherwise. Chapter 2. The Psychology of Self-Worth. Your self-worth is not determined by your achievements, your appearance, your bank account, or what others think of you. Yet most people live their entire lives trying to earn worth through external validation, creating a psychological prison that keeps them forever dependent on circumstances and other people's opinions for their sense of value. Understanding the true psychology of self-worth is essential because it forms the foundation of everything else in your life. Your relationships, your career success, your mental health, and your ability to level up. Self-worth is an internal assessment of your value as a human being. It's the deep, core belief about whether you matter, whether you deserve good things, and whether you're fundamentally okay as you are. This isn't the same as self-esteem, which fluctuates based on performance and external feedback. Self-worth is meant to be stable, unwavering, and independent of external circumstances. But for most people, self-worth has been hijacked by conditioning that teaches us we must prove our value rather than simply owning it. The development of self-worth begins in the earliest stages of life. Before you could even speak, your brain was forming neural pathways based on how you were treated, how your needs were met, and what messages you received about your importance. If you experienced consistent love, attention, and care, your brain developed pathways that support healthy self-worth. But if you experienced neglect, criticism, inconsistent care, or had to perform for love and attention, your brain developed pathways that make self-worth conditional on external factors. Here's what's crucial to understand. These early experiences didn't just create beliefs about yourself, they created entire neural networks that continue to influence your thoughts, emotions, and behaviors decades later. When someone with wounded self-worth receives a compliment, their brain literally processes it differently than someone with healthy self-worth. The compliment gets filtered through neural pathways that question its validity, minimize its importance, or dismiss it entirely. This isn't a choice. It's an automatic neurological response based on deeply embedded programming. The most damaging belief system around self-worth is the idea that you must earn your value through achievement, appearance, or approval. This creates what psychologists call conditional self-worth, where your sense of value depends on meeting certain standards or conditions. When you operate from conditional self-worth, you become addicted to external validation because it temporarily fills the void where unconditional self-worth should exist. But this validation is like a drug that requires increasingly higher doses to achieve the same effect. And when it's withdrawn, you crash harder than before. People with conditional self-worth become perfectionists, people-pleasers, or high achievers, not out of genuine passion, but out of a desperate need to prove their worth. They work obsessively, sacrifice their health and relationships, and live in constant fear of failure, because failure feels like proof that they're not enough. They might achieve impressive external success, but they never feel successful because their sense of worth remains tied to the next achievement, the next milestone, the next level of external validation. The neuroscience of self-worth reveals something fascinating. When you have healthy self-worth, your brain produces different chemicals than when your self-worth is damaged. People with strong self-worth have higher baseline levels of serotonin and dopamine, the neurotransmitters associated with happiness and motivation. Their stress response system is more regulated, meaning they don't interpret neutral situations as threats. They have stronger activity in the prefrontal cortex, the area of the brain responsible for rational thinking and emotional regulation. But when self-worth is damaged, the brain operates in a fundamentally different way. The default mode network, which determines your baseline thoughts when you're not focused on specific tasks, becomes hyperactive with self-critical and comparative thinking. The amygdala, your brain's alarm system, becomes oversensitive, interpreting normal social interactions as potential threats to your worth. This creates a cycle where low self-worth creates brain chemistry that reinforces low self-worth, making it incredibly difficult to break free without intentional intervention. Understanding the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic self-worth is life-changing. Intrinsic self-worth is the recognition that you have value simply because you exist. You matter because you're a conscious being capable of love, growth, and contribution. This worth cannot be earned, lost, or taken away. It's not dependent on your performance, your past, or your potential. Extrinsic self-worth, on the other hand, is based on external factors. What you accomplish, how you look, what others think of you, how much money you make, or how successful you become. The problem with extrinsic self-worth is that it's inherently unstable. No matter how much you achieve or accumulate, there's always more to prove. No matter how many people approve of you, there's always someone whose opinion you still crave. No matter how successful you become, there's always someone more successful to compare yourself to. This creates a psychological hamster wheel where you're constantly running but never arriving at a destination of feeling truly worthy. Building authentic self-worth requires rewiring your brain at the deepest level. This means identifying the specific beliefs and neural pathways that keep you stuck in patterns of seeking external validation. It means learning to recognize when you're operating from conditional self-worth and consciously choosing to respond differently. Most importantly, it means developing a relationship with yourself based on unconditional acceptance rather than conditional approval. The practice of building intrinsic self-worth starts with self-awareness. You must become conscious of the voice in your head that constantly evaluates, criticizes, and compares. You must notice when you're seeking validation from others and ask yourself what you're trying to prove. You must recognize when you're avoiding challenges because you're afraid they might reveal that you're not enough, and instead choose to engage with life from a place of curiosity rather than fear. True self-worth is not arrogance or thinking you're better than others. It's the quiet confidence that comes from knowing your value doesn't depend on being better than anyone else. It's the peace that comes from not needing to prove anything to anyone, including yourself. It's the freedom that comes from knowing that your worth is not on trial in every interaction, every challenge, and every opportunity for growth. Chapter 3. The Mirror Principle. Everything in your external world is a reflection of your internal world. This isn't spiritual philosophy. This is psychological fact backed by decades of research in cognitive neuroscience. The way you see yourself determines how you show up in the world, which determines how the world responds to you, which then reinforces your self-perception. This creates what's called the mirror principle. Your external reality mirrors your internal reality with frightening accuracy. Understanding and mastering this principle is one of the most powerful tools for transformation you'll ever discover. Your brain has a function called the reticular activating system that acts like a filter, determining what information from your environment gets through to your conscious awareness. This system is constantly scanning your environment and highlighting information that matches your existing beliefs, expectations, and self-concept, while filtering out information that contradicts them. If you believe you're unlucky, your brain will notice every piece of evidence that supports this belief while ignoring evidence to the contrary. If you believe you're not worthy of respect, your brain will focus on every interaction that confirms this belief while minimizing interactions that challenge it. This filtering system doesn't just affect what you notice, it affects how you interpret what you notice. Two people can experience the exact same interaction and come away with completely different interpretations based on their self-concept and expectations. Someone with healthy self-worth might interpret a neutral comment as genuinely neutral, while someone with damaged self-worth might interpret the same comment as criticism or rejection. The external reality is the same, but the internal experience is vastly different. But the mirror principle goes deeper than just perception. Your self-concept doesn't just determine how you interpret the world. It determines how you behave in the world. And your behavior influences how others respond to you, which creates a feedback loop that reinforces your original self-concept. If you believe you're not valuable, you'll unconsciously behave in ways that signal low value, poor posture, avoiding eye contact, speaking quietly, apologizing unnecessarily, not advocating for yourself. Others pick up on these signals and respond accordingly, treating you with less respect, which then confirms your belief that you're not valuable. This is why changing your external circumstances without changing your internal programming rarely creates lasting transformation. You might get a better job, lose weight, or improve your financial situation. But if your core self-concept hasn't changed, you'll unconsciously behave in ways that recreate your old reality. The new job will somehow become as stressful and unfulfilling as the old one. The weight will come back. The money will disappear. This isn't bad luck, it's the mirror principle in action. The most powerful aspect of the mirror principle is that it works in reverse. When you change your internal reality, your external reality must change to match it. This happens through multiple mechanisms. First, when your self-concept improves, your behavior automatically changes. You stand taller, speak with more confidence, make better decisions, and advocate for yourself more effectively. Second, your improved self-concept changes what you're willing to tolerate. You no longer accept disrespectful treatment, toxic relationships, or situations that don't serve your growth. Third, your brain's filtering system starts noticing opportunities and possibilities that were always there, but were previously invisible to you. Understanding the mirror principle explains why affirmations alone rarely create lasting change. Simply repeating positive statements while your deep programming remains unchanged creates internal conflict. Your conscious mind might be saying, "I am worthy of success," while your unconscious mind is running programs that say, "People like me don't succeed." This internal inconsistency creates cognitive dissonance and often makes you feel worse, not better. True transformation requires aligning your conscious beliefs with your unconscious programming. The key to leveraging the mirror principle is understanding that you must become internally what you want to experience externally. If you want to be treated with respect, you must first respect yourself at the deepest level. If you want to attract love, you must first cultivate self-love. If you want others to believe in your potential, you must first believe in it yourself. This isn't about fake it until you make it. This is about genuine internal transformation that naturally expresses itself in your external reality. One of the most profound applications of the mirror principle is in relationships. The people in your life are mirrors reflecting back your self-concept and unconscious beliefs. If you consistently attract partners who don't value you, this is a reflection of how much you value yourself. If you're surrounded by people who drain your energy, this reflects your boundaries and self-respect. If you find yourself in relationships where you're constantly trying to prove your worth, this reflects your belief that your worth must be earned rather than simply acknowledged. This doesn't mean you're responsible for other people's behavior, but it does mean you're responsible for what you tolerate and what you attract. When you truly love and value yourself, you naturally gravitate toward people who love and value you. When you respect yourself, you automatically command respect from others. When you believe in your worth, you attract people who also believe in your worth. This isn't about changing others, it's about changing yourself in a way that naturally shifts the dynamics of your relationships. The mirror principle also applies to your professional life. If you consistently feel undervalued at work, if you're passed over for promotions, if your ideas aren't taken seriously, these experiences are reflecting something about your internal programming. When you truly believe in your value and capabilities, you show up differently in professional settings. You communicate with more confidence, you advocate for yourself more effectively, and you make decisions that honor your worth rather than diminish it. Mastering the mirror principle requires brutal honesty about what your external reality is telling you about your internal state. If your life lacks abundance, what does this say about your relationship with deserving good things? If your relationships are filled with drama and conflict, what does this reflect about your internal peace and self-worth? If you're not achieving the success you say you want, what does this reveal about your deep beliefs, about your capabilities and worthiness of success? This level of self-examination can be uncomfortable because it requires taking responsibility for your role in creating your current reality. But this responsibility is also your power. If your internal world creates your external world, then changing your internal world gives you the power to change everything. The mirror principle isn't just an explanation of how reality works. It's a roadmap for transformation that puts you in the driver's seat of your own life. Chapter 4. The Identity Shift. Your identity is not who you are. It's who you believe you are. And who you believe you are determines every decision you make, every action you take, and every result you create. Most people live their entire lives trapped in an identity that was formed during childhood and adolescence, never realizing that this identity is not fixed, permanent, or even true. It's simply a collection of beliefs about yourself that have been reinforced through repetition and experience. The most powerful transformation you can undergo is an identity shift, where you consciously choose who you want to be, rather than unconsciously accepting who you think you are. Your current identity was not created by you. It was created for you. It was formed through the messages you received from parents, teachers, peers, and society about who you are and what you're capable of. Every time someone said you were smart or stupid, talented or hopeless, destined for greatness or mediocrity, these messages became data points that your brain used to construct your identity. Over time, these external messages became internal beliefs, and these internal beliefs became your identity. But here's what's crucial to understand. Your brain doesn't distinguish between an identity that serves you and one that limits you. It simply seeks to maintain consistency between your beliefs about yourself and your actions. This is why people often sabotage themselves when they start to succeed beyond their identity's limitations. If you identify as someone who struggles financially, your brain will create thoughts and behaviors that maintain financial struggle. If you identify as someone who is unlovable, your brain will generate patterns that push love away. Your brain's job is not to make you happy or successful. It's to make you consistent with your identity. The neuroscience of identity reveals that your sense of self is maintained by specific neural networks in your brain. These networks are strengthened every time you act in ways that are consistent with your identity and weakened when you act in ways that contradict it. This is why changing your identity feels so uncomfortable at first. You're literally fighting against established neural pathways that have been reinforced for years or even decades. Understanding this process is liberating because it reveals that your identity is not your fate. It's your choice. The same neuroplasticity that locked you into a limiting identity can free you from it. But this requires more than just thinking differently. It requires acting differently, consistently over time. Your new identity must be reinforced through repeated actions that align with who you want to become, not who you used to be. The first step in creating an identity shift is getting clear about your current identity and how it's been holding you back. Most people are unconscious of their identity because it feels so natural and automatic. You must become aware of the stories you tell about yourself, the labels you use to describe yourself, and the limitations you accept as fact. Do you identify as someone who is not good with money? Someone who always struggles in relationships? Someone who is not naturally confident or successful? These identity labels might seem harmless, but they're actually incredibly powerful programming instructions that your brain follows religiously. When you say, "I'm not good with money," you're not just describing your past experience, you're programming your future behavior. Your brain takes this identity statement as a command and generates thoughts, emotions, and actions that ensure you continue to not be good with money. The same principle applies to every limiting identity you hold about yourself. Creating a powerful new identity requires you to get specific about who you want to become. This isn't about creating a fantasy version of yourself. It's about identifying the version of yourself that you would need to be to achieve your goals and live your values. If you want to be financially free, what kind of person achieves financial freedom? If you want to have amazing relationships, what kind of person attracts and maintains amazing relationships? If you want to be successful in your career, what kind of person achieves that level of success? The key to sustainable identity shift is understanding that you must become this person first. Then, the external results will follow. Most people try to change their circumstances first, hoping this will change how they feel about themselves. But lasting transformation works in the opposite direction. You must shift your identity. Embody the thoughts and behaviors of your new identity. And then, your circumstances will shift to match your new sense of self. This process requires what psychologists call identity rehearsal. Just like an actor prepares for a role by studying the character and practicing their mannerisms, you must practice being the person you want to become. This means thinking like this person would think, making decisions like this person would make decisions, and responding to challenges like this person would respond. At first, this feels like acting, but over time, it becomes natural as your brain builds new neural pathways that support your new identity. One of the most powerful tools for identity shift is asking yourself empowering questions throughout the day. Instead of operating from your old identity's programming, you interrupt automatic patterns by asking, what would the person I'm becoming do in this situation? How would someone who truly values themselves respond to this? What decision would someone who believes in their worth make right now? These questions activate your prefrontal cortex and allow you to choose your response rather than react from old programming. The identity shift process also requires you to update your internal dialogue. The voice in your head must begin speaking to you and about you in a way that aligns with your new identity. If your old identity was filled with self-criticism and doubt, your new identity must be filled with self-compassion and confidence. This doesn't mean delusional positive thinking. It means speaking to yourself with the same kindness and encouragement you would offer to someone you love and believe in. Physical embodiment is another crucial aspect of identity shift. Your new identity must be expressed through your posture, your voice, your eye contact, and your overall presence. The person you're becoming moves through the world differently than the person you used to be. They take up space unapologetically, they speak with conviction, and they carry themselves with quiet confidence. Your body language must align with your new identity for the shift to be complete and sustainable. The most challenging part of identity shift is maintaining consistency when external circumstances don't immediately reflect your new sense of self. There will be a lag time between when you shift internally and when your external reality catches up. During this period, you must continue to embody your new identity, even when the evidence doesn't support it yet. This is where most people give up, reverting to their old identity because the new one doesn't seem to be working. But this is exactly when persistence is most important, because lasting change always happens from the inside out. Chapter 5. Rewriting your internal script. Every person walks through life with an internal script, a continuous narrative that interprets events, predicts outcomes, and determines responses. This script was written long before you were conscious enough to choose its content, and it has been running automatically in the background of your mind for decades. For most people, this internal script is filled with limiting beliefs, harsh self-criticism, and fearful predictions that keep them trapped in patterns of self-sabotage and mediocrity. But here's the life-changing truth. You can rewrite this script. You can become the author of your own story instead of the victim of someone else's programming. Your internal script contains thousands of micro-beliefs about yourself, other people, and how the world works. These beliefs were formed through early experiences, cultural conditioning, and repeated messages you received about your worth, capabilities, and potential. They include statements like, "I have to work twice as hard to get half as much. Good things don't happen to people like me. I'm not the type of person who succeeds easily. And if I get too confident, something bad will happen." These beliefs feel true because they've been reinforced through years of experience, but they're not universal truths. They're simply stories that have become so familiar they feel like facts. The power of your internal script cannot be overstated. It determines what opportunities you notice and which ones you ignore. It influences what risks you're willing to take and which ones you avoid. It shapes how you interpret feedback, how you respond to challenges, and how you treat yourself when you make mistakes. Most importantly, it determines what you believe is possible for your life and what you accept as inevitable limitations. Neuroscience research shows that these internal scripts are maintained by specific neural pathways in your brain. When you think a familiar thought, neural pathways that have been strengthened through repetition fire automatically, making the thought feel natural and true. The more you think a particular thought, the stronger the neural pathway becomes, and the more likely you are to think that thought again. This creates a self-reinforcing cycle where your internal script becomes increasingly entrenched over time. But the same neuroplasticity that created your limiting script can be used to create an empowering one. Your brain's ability to form new neural pathways means you can literally rewire your internal programming. However, this requires more than just positive thinking or occasional affirmations. It requires a systematic approach to identifying, challenging, and replacing the specific beliefs and thought patterns that make up your current script. The first step in rewriting your internal script is becoming aware of what your current script actually says. Most of these beliefs and thought patterns are unconscious, operating below the level of conscious awareness. You must begin paying attention to your automatic thoughts, especially in challenging situations. When you face a setback, what does the voice in your head immediately say? When an opportunity arises, what thoughts come up about your ability to succeed? When you consider taking a risk or pursuing a goal, what internal dialogue emerges? One of the most revealing exercises is to write down your automatic thoughts for a week without trying to change them. Simply observe and record the internal commentary that runs through your mind throughout the day. You'll likely be shocked by how negative, limiting, and harsh much of this internal dialogue is. The voice in your head probably says things to you that you would never say to another person. Yet you've become so accustomed to this internal criticism that you barely notice it. Once you become aware of your limiting internal script, the next step is to challenge its validity. Most of the beliefs that make up your script were formed during childhood and adolescence, when you had limited life experience and immature cognitive processing abilities. A 5-year-old who was criticized for making mistakes might develop the belief, "I have to be perfect to be loved." A teenager who was rejected by peers might form the belief, "I'm not likable." These beliefs made sense given the limited data available at the time, but they're often completely inaccurate when applied to adult life, with expanded capabilities and opportunities. For each limiting belief you identify, ask yourself, is this belief absolutely true? What evidence supports it and what evidence contradicts it? Where did this belief come from originally? Is the source of this belief someone whose opinion should still dictate your life? How has this belief served you, and how has it limited you? What would be possible if this belief wasn't true? These questions help you see your internal script objectively rather than accepting it as unquestionable truth. The process of rewriting your internal script requires you to consciously choose new beliefs that align with the person you want to become. These new beliefs must be believable to you, not just positive platitudes that create internal resistance. If your old belief was, "I always mess things up," jumping to "I never make mistakes" will create cognitive dissonance. A more believable bridge belief might be, "I learn from my mistakes and get better over time," or "Making mistakes is part of growth and doesn't define my worth." Installing new beliefs requires repetition and emotional reinforcement. Your brain changes through consistent practice, not occasional effort. This means you must consciously practice thinking new thoughts until they become automatic. Every time you catch yourself thinking an old limiting thought, you interrupt the pattern and consciously choose a more empowering alternative. Over time, the new neural pathways become stronger than the old ones, and your new script becomes your default programming. Emotional reinforcement accelerates this process dramatically. When you combine new beliefs with strong, positive emotions, you create more powerful neural connections. This is why visualization exercises that include emotional engagement are so effective. When you imagine yourself succeeding while feeling the emotions of confidence and joy, you're not just thinking new thoughts, you're creating new neural pathways that associate success with positive feelings. Your new internal script must also include updated beliefs about what you deserve and what's possible for your life. If your old script was filled with limitations and scarcity, your new script must reflect abundance and possibility. This includes beliefs about your right to success, happiness, love, and fulfillment. You must give yourself permission to want more, achieve more, and become more than your old programming suggested was possible. The rewriting process also involves changing the tone and style of your internal voice. If your internal dialogue has been harsh and critical, it must become encouraging and supportive. If it has been fearful and pessimistic, it must become confident and optimistic. This isn't about delusional thinking. It's about speaking to yourself in a way that supports your growth rather than sabotages it. One of the most powerful techniques for rewriting your internal script is to develop what psychologists call a growth narrative. This is a story about your life that focuses on your capacity for development, learning, and transformation rather than fixed limitations and permanent labels. In this narrative, challenges become opportunities for growth, setbacks become learning experiences, and your past becomes preparation for your future rather than a prison that defines your potential. The final step in rewriting your internal script is consistency and patience. Neural pathways that have been strengthened for decades don't change overnight. You must be committed to the daily practice of thinking new thoughts and challenging old patterns. There will be times when your old script feels more true and comfortable than your new one. This is normal and expected. The key is to keep practicing your new script even when it feels unnatural, knowing that consistency over time will make it feel increasingly natural and true. Chapter 6: Emotional Mastery Through Self-Love. Most people are slaves to their emotions. They react instead of respond. They make decisions based on temporary feelings rather than long-term values. And they allow their emotional state to dictate their actions. But here's what successful people understand that average people don't. Emotions are data, not directives. They provide information about your internal state and external circumstances, but they don't have to control your behavior. When you truly love yourself, you develop emotional mastery, the ability to experience emotions fully without being controlled by them. Emotional mastery begins with understanding that emotions are not random occurrences that happen to you. They're biochemical responses generated by your brain based on your thoughts, beliefs, and interpretations of events. Every emotion you experience starts with a thought, conscious or unconscious, about what something means. When you change your interpretation of an event, you change the emotional response it generates. This is why two people can experience the same situation and have completely different emotional reactions. The neuroscience of emotions reveals that your brain's emotional processing center, the limbic system, responds to threats much faster than your rational thinking center, the prefrontal cortex. This is why you often feel an emotional reaction before you consciously understand what's happening. Your brain's job is to keep you alive, not to keep you happy. So it's wired to prioritize emotional responses that were useful for survival thousands of years ago, but often sabotage success in modern life. When you operate from fear, insecurity, or wounded self-worth, your emotional responses are often disproportionate to actual threats. A critical email feels like a life-or-death situation. A social rejection feels like evidence that you're fundamentally unlovable. A professional setback feels like proof that you're destined for failure. These intense emotional reactions aren't based on present reality. They're based on old programming that interprets neutral events as existential threats to your worth and safety. But when you love yourself deeply and unconditionally, your emotional baseline shifts dramatically. You develop what psychologists call emotional resilience, the ability to experience difficult emotions without being overwhelmed by them. This doesn't mean you become emotionally numb or stop caring about things. Instead, you develop the capacity to feel your emotions fully while maintaining perspective about what they actually mean and how you want to respond. Self-love creates emotional mastery through several key mechanisms. First, when you truly value yourself, you stop taking everything personally. You understand that other people's behavior is usually about their internal state, not about you. When someone is rude, dismissive, or critical, instead of immediately assuming you've done something wrong or that you're not worthy of respect, you recognize that their behavior reflects their own struggles, insecurities, or limitations. Second, self-love provides emotional security that reduces the intensity of fear-based reactions. When you know your worth isn't dependent on external validation or perfect performance, you can take risks, face challenges, and handle criticism without your emotional system going into crisis mode. You develop what's called secure attachment to yourself, meaning your sense of safety and worth comes from within rather than from external sources. Third, self-love enables you to process emotions more effectively. Instead of avoiding difficult feelings or being consumed by them, you learn to experience them as temporary visitors that provide information and then move through your system. You develop the skill of emotional surfing, riding the waves of intense feelings without being knocked over by them. The practice of emotional mastery through self-love requires developing several specific skills. The first is emotional awareness, the ability to recognize what you're feeling as you're feeling it. Most people live in such a disconnected state that they don't notice their emotions until they've already taken action based on them. You must learn to pause and identify your emotional state before it drives your behavior. The second skill is emotional acceptance. Many people judge their emotions as good or bad, right or wrong, which creates additional emotional layers on top of the original feeling. When you love yourself, you accept all of your emotions as valid parts of your human experience. You don't judge yourself for feeling angry, sad, scared, or disappointed. You simply acknowledge these feelings and ask what information they're providing. The third skill is emotional regulation, the ability to influence your emotional state when necessary. This doesn't mean suppressing or avoiding emotions. It means learning techniques to shift your emotional state when it's not serving your highest good. This includes practices like deep breathing, progressive muscle relaxation, mindfulness, meditation, physical exercise, and cognitive reframing. The fourth skill is emotional expression, communicating your feelings in healthy, constructive ways. When you love yourself, you honor your emotions by expressing them appropriately, rather than stuffing them down or exploding inappropriately. You learn to use language like "I feel" instead of "you make me feel," taking responsibility for your emotional experience while communicating your needs clearly. Emotional mastery also requires understanding the difference between primary and secondary emotions. Primary emotions are your immediate, natural responses to events. Disappointment when something doesn't work out. Excitement when something good happens. Fear when facing uncertainty. Secondary emotions are your reactions to your primary emotions. Shame about feeling disappointed, guilt about feeling excited, anger about feeling afraid. These secondary emotions often cause more suffering than the original feeling and create emotional complexity that clouds your ability to respond effectively. When you master your emotions through self-love, you transform your entire life experience. You stop being at the mercy of your moods. You make decisions based on your values and long-term goals rather than temporary feelings. You respond to challenges with wisdom and creativity rather than reactive panic. Most importantly, you become emotionally available for the people and opportunities in your life because you're not constantly managing internal emotional chaos. The ultimate goal of emotional mastery isn't to feel good all the time. It's to feel everything without being controlled by anything. It's the ability to experience the full spectrum of human emotions while maintaining your center, your values, and your commitment to your highest good. This is what allows you to love yourself through every season of life and continue leveling up regardless of external circumstances. Chapter 7. The Art of Boundaries and Self-Respect. Boundaries are not walls you build to keep people out. They're standards you set to keep yourself in integrity with your values, needs, and well-being. Most people struggle with boundaries because they confuse them with selfishness or meanness. But healthy boundaries are actually one of the highest forms of self-love and respect for others. When you have strong boundaries, you teach people how to treat you. You protect your energy and resources, and you create space for authentic relationships based on mutual respect rather than manipulation or obligation. The psychology of boundaries reveals that people who struggle with boundary setting typically have underlying beliefs about their worth, their right to have needs, and what they must do to earn love and acceptance. If you were raised in an environment where your needs were dismissed, where love was conditional on pleasing others, or where expressing your preferences led to conflict or withdrawal of affection, you likely developed beliefs that having boundaries is selfish, dangerous, or wrong. These early experiences create neural pathways that make boundary violations feel normal and boundary setting feel threatening. Your brain learned that keeping others happy, even at the expense of your own well-being, was necessary for survival and connection. But what once protected you from abandonment or conflict now prevents you from having healthy relationships and living authentically. Understanding the neuroscience of boundaries helps explain why they're so difficult to implement initially. When you set a boundary with someone who's used to having unlimited access to your time, energy, or resources, They often respond with anger, guilt-tripping, or manipulation. Your brain interprets their negative reaction as a threat to the relationship, flooding your system with stress hormones and creating intense pressure to abandon the boundary to restore harmony. But here's what you must understand. The discomfort you feel when setting boundaries is not evidence that boundaries are wrong. It's evidence that they're necessary. People who react poorly to your boundaries are revealing that they were benefiting from your lack of them. Healthy people respect boundaries because they have their own. Unhealthy people violate boundaries because they don't respect themselves or others. Boundaries exist in multiple dimensions of your life. Physical boundaries protect your body, your personal space, and your physical resources. Emotional boundaries protect your feelings, your energy, and your psychological well-being. Time boundaries protect your schedule, your priorities, and your availability. Financial boundaries protect your money, your financial goals, and your economic security. Digital boundaries protect your attention, your privacy, and your mental space from technological overwhelm. The foundation of healthy boundaries is clarity about your own values, needs, and limits. You cannot set effective boundaries if you don't know what you're protecting. This requires honest self-reflection about what matters most to you, what drains your energy, what situations make you feel uncomfortable or resentful, and what you need to feel safe and respected in relationships. Many people avoid setting boundaries because they fear conflict. But avoiding boundaries actually creates more conflict over time. When you don't communicate your limits clearly, people unknowingly cross them, leading to resentment, passive-aggressive behavior, and eventual explosions. Boundaries prevent these problems by creating clear expectations and mutual understanding about what behavior is and isn't acceptable. Setting boundaries requires both internal and external work. Internally, you must overcome the programming that tells you your needs don't matter, that you must earn love through self-sacrifice, or that conflict is always dangerous. You must develop what psychologists call differentiation, the ability to maintain your sense of self in relationship with others, without losing yourself to please them or pushing them away to protect yourself. Externally, setting boundaries requires clear, direct communication about your limits and consistent follow-through when those limits are crossed. This doesn't mean being harsh or punitive. It means being honest about what you will and won't accept and taking action to protect your boundaries when necessary. The key is to communicate boundaries from a place of self-respect rather than anger or resentment. One of the most important aspects of boundary setting is understanding that boundaries are about your behavior, not other people's. You cannot control how others respond to your boundaries, but you can control how you respond when your boundaries are violated. This might mean leaving a conversation that becomes disrespectful, ending a relationship that consistently violates your limits, or removing yourself from situations that compromise your values. Boundaries also require regular maintenance and adjustment. As you grow and change, your boundaries may need to evolve. What you are willing to tolerate in your 20s may not be acceptable in your 30s. Relationships that once served your growth may become obstacles to your continued development. Healthy boundaries are dynamic, responsive to your changing needs and circumstances. The practice of boundary setting begins with small, low-stakes situations where you can build confidence and skill. You might start by saying no to social invitations that don't interest you, setting limits on how much you'll help others with their problems, or establishing specific times when you're not available for work communications. As you develop boundary-setting muscles in easier situations, you'll have the strength to address more challenging boundary violations. When you master the art of boundaries, you transform every relationship in your life. You attract people who respect and value you because you respect and value yourself. You repel people who only want to take from you because you've made it clear that mutual respect is required. Most importantly, you develop unshakable self-respect that allows you to navigate any situation with confidence and integrity. Chapter 8. Transforming Relationships Through Self-Love. Your relationship with yourself is the template for every other relationship in your life. The way you treat yourself, talk to yourself, and value yourself determines what you'll accept and expect from others. Most people approach relationships backward, seeking love, validation, and worth from external sources while neglecting the most important relationship they'll ever have, the one with themselves. When you transform your relationship with yourself through genuine self-love, every other relationship in your life must transform as well. The psychology of relationships reveals that we unconsciously seek partners and friends who reflect our level of self-worth. If you don't believe you deserve unconditional love, you'll attract partners who love you conditionally. If you don't respect yourself, you'll attract people who don't respect you. If you don't know your own worth, you'll settle for relationships that undervalue you. This isn't conscious or intentional. It's an automatic process driven by your subconscious programming about what you deserve and what feels familiar. This pattern explains why people often find themselves in similar relationship dynamics repeatedly. Even with different people, the external players change, but the underlying patterns remain the same because the internal programming hasn't changed. You might leave a relationship because your partner doesn't appreciate you, only to find yourself with someone new who also takes you for granted. You might end a friendship because someone consistently violates your boundaries, only to develop new friendships with people who do the same thing. The neuroscience of attachment shows that our early relationship experiences create neural templates that our brain uses to navigate future relationships. If you experienced secure attachment in childhood, where your needs were consistently met and you felt safe and valued, your brain developed templates for healthy relationship dynamics. But if you experienced insecure attachment, whether through neglect, inconsistency, or trauma, your brain developed templates that expect and create dysfunction in relationships. These neural templates operate unconsciously, influencing who you're attracted to, what behavior you'll tolerate, how you interpret ambiguous actions, and how you respond to relationship challenges. Someone with secure attachment templates naturally gravitates toward healthy partners and maintains boundaries that protect the relationship's health. Someone with insecure attachment templates often feels drawn to unavailable, inconsistent, or problematic partners, because that's what feels normal and familiar. Understanding these patterns is crucial because they reveal that relationship problems aren't just about finding the right person or learning better communication skills. They're about healing your relationship with yourself so that you can create and maintain healthy dynamics with others. When you truly love yourself, you automatically raise your standards for how others treat you, because treating yourself well becomes your baseline expectation. Self-love transforms relationships in several profound ways. First, It eliminates the desperate need for external validation that drives much relationship dysfunction. When you know your worth internally, you don't need others to constantly prove it to you. You don't need excessive reassurance, constant communication, or dramatic demonstrations of love because you feel secure in your own value. This allows relationships to breathe and develop naturally rather than being suffocated by neediness or insecurity. Second, self-love enables you to love others more fully and authentically. When you're not constantly trying to get your needs met through manipulation, people-pleasing, or emotional drama, you have genuine love to offer. You can appreciate others for who they are rather than what they can do for you. You can support their growth even when it's inconvenient for you, because you're not dependent on them staying small to make you feel safe. Third, self-love creates the emotional stability necessary for healthy conflict resolution. When disagreements arise, instead of interpreting them as threats to your worth or the relationship, you can engage with curiosity and a genuine desire for understanding. You don't take everything personally because you know that other people's behavior usually reflects their internal state, not your value as a person. The practice of transforming relationships through self-love begins with taking full responsibility for your own emotional well-being. This means no longer expecting others to manage your feelings, meet all your needs, or complete you in some way. You become a whole person who chooses to share your life with others, rather than a half person desperately seeking someone to make you complete. This doesn't mean becoming emotionally self-sufficient to the point of not needing anyone. Healthy interdependence is different from codependence. In healthy relationships, you choose to share vulnerabilities, support each other's growth, and create mutual joy and fulfillment. In codependent relationships, you need each other in ways that create anxiety, resentment, and limitation for both people. Transforming existing relationships requires both patience and courage. As you develop stronger self-love and clearer boundaries, some people in your life may resist these changes because they were benefiting from your previous patterns. They might accuse you of being selfish, difficult, or different. This resistance is actually information about which relationships were based on healthy mutual respect and which were based on unhealthy dynamics. When you truly love yourself, you naturally attract people who also have healthy relationships with themselves. You become a magnet for secure, emotionally mature individuals who are capable of genuine intimacy and mutual growth. The drama, manipulation, and dysfunction that characterized your old relationships feels foreign and unacceptable because you've experienced what healthy connection actually feels like. Chapter 9. Taking action from love, not fear. Every action you take is motivated by one of two fundamental forces: love or fear. Love-based actions come from abundance, confidence, and a genuine desire to grow and contribute. Fear-based actions come from scarcity, insecurity, and a desperate need to protect yourself from perceived threats. Most people spend their lives taking action from fear without realizing it, which is why they often achieve external success while feeling internally empty, anxious, and unfulfilled. When you learn to take action from love, particularly self-love, everything changes. Fear-based action is reactive, driven by what you want to avoid rather than what you want to create. You work obsessively because you're afraid of being seen as lazy or unsuccessful. You people please because you're afraid of rejection or conflict. You accumulate money because you're afraid of being poor. You avoid risks because you're afraid of failure. You stay in unsatisfying situations because you're afraid the unknown will be worse than the known. These motivations might create temporary results, but they also create chronic stress, burnout, and a deep sense that no amount of external achievement will ever be enough. The neuroscience of motivation reveals that fear-based and love-based actions activate completely different neural networks in your brain. Fear-based actions activate your sympathetic nervous system, flooding your body with stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. This creates a state of chronic activation that's exhausting and unsustainable. Love-based actions activate your parasympathetic nervous system, promoting creativity, connection, and sustainable energy. When you operate from fear, your brain's focus narrows to immediate threats and short-term survival strategies. You lose access to your higher-order thinking skills, like creativity, strategic planning, and emotional intelligence. You make decisions that protect you from immediate discomfort, but often sabotage your long-term goals and well-being. Fear makes you reactive instead of proactive, defensive instead of creative, and closed instead of open to possibilities. Love-based action, particularly action rooted in self-love, comes from a completely different place. You take risks because you believe in your ability to handle whatever happens. You work hard because you're passionate about your goals and committed to your growth. You set boundaries because you value yourself too much to accept disrespectful treatment. You pursue opportunities because you're excited about possibilities rather than terrified of missing out. The shift from fear-based to love-based action requires you to examine the underlying motivations behind your behaviors. For most people, this examination reveals that many actions they thought were positive were actually driven by fear, insecurity, or the need to prove something. The perfectionist who works 18-hour days might think they're motivated by excellence, but they're actually motivated by fear of judgment. The people-pleaser who says yes to everything might think they're being kind, but they're actually motivated by fear of rejection. Recognizing fear-based motivations isn't about judging yourself harshly. It's about gaining awareness that allows you to choose differently. When you understand that your current actions are driven by fear, you can ask yourself, what would I do in this situation if I truly loved and valued myself? This question immediately shifts your perspective from protection to creation, from scarcity to abundance, from reaction to intention. Taking action from self-love means making decisions that honor your long-term well-being, rather than your short-term comfort. This might mean having difficult conversations that fear would make you avoid. It might mean pursuing opportunities that fear would make you dismiss as impossible. It might mean investing in yourself and your growth even when fear tells you it's too risky or expensive. It might mean ending relationships or situations that fear keeps you trapped in because change feels scary. One of the most profound shifts that occurs when you take action from love is that failure stops feeling like a threat to your identity. When you're motivated by fear, failure feels like evidence that you're not enough, which makes you avoid risks and play small. But when you're motivated by love, failure becomes valuable feedback that helps you grow and improve. You can take bigger risks because you know that your worth isn't dependent on perfect outcomes. The transformation from fear-based to love-based action is gradual and requires patience with yourself. You've probably been operating from fear for years or decades. So changing this pattern takes time and practice. Start with small decisions and gradually work your way up to bigger ones. Notice when fear is driving your choices and consciously choose love-based alternatives. Over time, love-based action becomes more natural and automatic. Chapter 10. Resilience through self-compassion. Life will test you. Setbacks, failures, disappointments, and challenges are not optional features of human existence. They are inevitable components of any life lived fully. The difference between people who crumble under pressure and those who use adversity as fuel for growth isn't their circumstances, it's their relationship with themselves during difficult times. Resilience isn't about being tough enough to withstand anything. It's about being compassionate enough with yourself to recover from everything. Most people approach setbacks with harsh self-criticism, believing that being hard on themselves will motivate better performance. When they make mistakes, they engage in brutal self-attack. When they face challenges, they judge themselves for not being stronger. When they experience failure, they interpret it as evidence of their fundamental inadequacy. This approach doesn't create resilience, it creates fragility disguised as toughness. The neuroscience of self-compassion reveals something revolutionary. Treating yourself with kindness during difficult times actually makes you more resilient, not less. When you respond to setbacks with self-compassion, your brain's threat detection system calms down, allowing you access to higher-order thinking skills like creativity, problem-solving, and strategic planning. Self-criticism, on the other hand, activates your brain's threat response, flooding your system with stress hormones that impair cognitive function and decision-making ability. Self-compassion consists of three core components that work together to create psychological resilience. The first is self-kindness. Treating yourself with the same gentleness and understanding you would offer to a good friend facing similar challenges. This means speaking to yourself with encouragement rather than criticism, offering yourself comfort rather than punishment, and recognizing that making mistakes and facing difficulties are part of being human, not evidence of personal failure. The second component is common humanity, recognizing that struggle, setback, and failure are shared human experiences rather than signs of personal inadequacy. When you're suffering, your brain naturally makes you feel isolated and alone, as if you're the only person who has ever faced such challenges. Self-compassion helps you remember that difficulty is universal and that your struggles connect you to the broader human experience rather than separating you from it. The third component is mindfulness, the ability to observe your thoughts and emotions without being overwhelmed by them. When you're going through a difficult time, mindfulness allows you to acknowledge your pain without becoming consumed by it. You can feel disappointed without believing you're a disappointment. You can experience fear without believing you're in danger. You can feel sad without believing you're broken. The practice of self-compassion begins with awareness of your internal dialogue during challenging times. Most people are unconscious of how harshly they speak to themselves when things go wrong. They call themselves names, make sweeping negative judgments about their character, and engage in catastrophic thinking about their future. Becoming aware of this internal criticism is the first step in changing it. When you notice harsh self-criticism arising, you can interrupt the pattern by asking yourself, "What would I say to a dear friend who was facing this same situation?" This simple question immediately shifts your perspective from attack to support, from judgment to understanding. You would never speak to a friend the way you speak to yourself during difficult times. And recognizing this discrepancy can motivate you to extend the same kindness to yourself. Another powerful practice is developing what researchers call self-compassionate reframing. Instead of interpreting setbacks as evidence of your inadequacy, you learn to see them as information about what needs to be adjusted or improved. Instead of viewing challenges as punishment for your flaws, you see them as opportunities for growth and learning. This doesn't mean denying reality or pretending everything is fine when it's not. It means interpreting reality in ways that support your well-being and growth, rather than your destruction. The ultimate goal of self-compassion isn't to eliminate difficulties from your life, but to develop an unshakable relationship with yourself that can weather any storm. When you know that you'll treat yourself with kindness regardless of what happens, you can take bigger risks because you're not afraid of how you'll respond to yourself if things don't work out. When you trust that you'll support yourself through any challenge, you can pursue ambitious goals because you know you have your own back no matter what. Chapter 11. The Success Mindset Through Self-Love. Success is not something you achieve, it's something you become. Most people approach success backward, believing that external accomplishments will create internal fulfillment and self-worth. They think that once they reach a certain income level, relationship status, or social position, they'll finally feel successful and worthy. But this approach creates a psychological trap where you're constantly chasing external validation while feeling internally empty, no matter how much you achieve. True success begins with loving yourself enough to define success on your own terms and pursue it from a place of abundance rather than scarcity. The psychology of success reveals that your relationship with yourself determines your relationship with achievement. If you don't believe you deserve success, you'll unconsciously sabotage yourself when you start to achieve it. If you think you must suffer to earn good things, you'll create unnecessary struggle in your path to success. If you believe success makes you selfish or changes you in negative ways, you'll resist the very achievements you claim to want. These limiting beliefs about success are often unconscious, but incredibly powerful in shaping your actions and results. Your brain's reticular activating system plays a crucial role in success by filtering reality based on your beliefs about what's possible for you. When you love yourself and believe you deserve success, your brain notices opportunities, resources, and connections that support your goals. When you don't feel worthy of success, your brain filters out these same opportunities, making it seem like success is reserved for other people but not available to you. This isn't about positive thinking. It's about aligning your subconscious programming with your conscious goals. The neuroscience of achievement shows that people who maintain long-term success have different neural patterns than those who achieve temporary success but then lose it. Sustainable success is associated with strong activity in the prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for long-term planning, impulse control, and values-based decision-making. This brain region is strengthened when you operate from self-love and weakened when you operate from fear, desperation, or the need to prove your worth. When you love yourself, you develop what researchers call an abundance mindset, the belief that there are unlimited opportunities for success and that other people's achievements don't diminish your own possibilities. This mindset allows you to collaborate instead of compete, to celebrate others' success instead of feeling threatened by it, and to take risks without the paralyzing fear that failure will prove you're not enough. Abundance thinking creates more abundance because it opens you to possibilities that scarcity thinking makes invisible. Self-love also transforms your relationship with failure, which is essential for long-term success. When you don't love yourself, failure feels like evidence of your fundamental inadequacy, making you avoid risks and play small to protect your fragile self-image. But when you truly love yourself, failure becomes valuable feedback that helps you grow and improve. You can take bigger risks because you know that your worth isn't dependent on perfect outcomes. You can fail faster and more frequently, which actually accelerates your path to success. The practice of developing a success mindset through self-love begins with examining your current beliefs about success and achievement. Many people have unconscious beliefs that success is selfish, that good things don't happen to people like them, that they must choose between success and relationships, or that achieving too much will make them lose their humility or authenticity. These beliefs create internal resistance that sabotages external efforts. You must also examine your motivations for wanting success. Are you pursuing achievement to prove your worth, to gain approval from others, or to fill an internal void? Or are you pursuing success as an expression of your potential, as a way to contribute to the world, and as a natural result of living authentically? Success pursued from wounded motivations often leads to burnout, emptiness, and the constant need for more external validation. Success pursued from self-love creates fulfillment, sustainability, and the desire to help others succeed as well. Developing a healthy relationship with money is a crucial component of the success mindset. Money is simply a tool for exchange, but many people have complex emotional relationships with it based on childhood programming, cultural messages, and personal experiences. If you believe money is the root of all evil, that wealthy people are greedy or corrupt, or that wanting money makes you shallow, you'll unconsciously limit your financial success. If you believe you don't deserve financial abundance or that having money means others have less, you'll sabotage opportunities for wealth creation. Self-love allows you to see money as a neutral tool that amplifies who you already are. If you're generous, money makes you more generous. If you're kind, money allows you to be kind on a larger scale. If you're growth-oriented, money provides resources for continued development. When you love yourself, you want financial abundance not for ego gratification, but because it gives you more options for expressing your values and contributing to the world. The success mindset also requires developing what psychologists call delay of gratification, the ability to sacrifice short-term pleasure for long-term gain. This skill is strengthened when you love yourself, because self-love makes you care about your future self as much as your present self. You're willing to invest time, energy, and resources now because you want to create a better life for the person you're becoming. Without self-love, it's difficult to delay gratification because you don't believe you deserve future rewards. Another crucial aspect of the success mindset is learning to receive abundance gracefully. Many people unconsciously deflect compliments, minimize their achievements, or feel guilty about their success because they don't feel worthy of good things. This creates a psychological ceiling that limits how much success you can achieve and maintain. When you love yourself, you can receive praise, money, opportunities, and recognition without feeling like you're taking something away from others or that you don't deserve it. The success mindset through self-love also involves redefining what success means to you personally. Society often defines success in narrow terms: wealth, status, power, fame. But true success is living in alignment with your values, expressing your authentic self, contributing meaningfully to the world, and creating a life you genuinely love. When you define success on your own terms, you can achieve it regardless of external circumstances, because it's based on internal alignment rather than external validation. Maintaining the success mindset requires regular practices that reinforce your self-worth and vision. This includes celebrating small wins along the way rather than only acknowledging major milestones. It means surrounding yourself with people who support your growth rather than those who try to keep you small. It involves continuously learning and growing rather than resting on past achievements. Most importantly, it requires remembering that your worth isn't dependent on your level of success, which paradoxically makes you more likely to achieve sustained success. The ultimate goal isn't to achieve success so you can finally love yourself. It's to love yourself so deeply that success becomes a natural expression of who you are. When you operate from this foundation, you attract opportunities that align with your authentic self. You make decisions that serve your long-term well-being, and you create success that feels fulfilling rather than empty. This is how you break the cycle of achievement addiction and create a life of genuine abundance and satisfaction. Chapter 12. Creating your vision and living authentically. Most people live their lives according to other people's expectations, following paths that society deems successful rather than pursuing what genuinely fulfills them. They choose careers based on family pressure, enter relationships that look good on paper but feel empty inside, and pursue goals that sound impressive but don't align with their authentic selves. This disconnect between who they really are and how they live creates a profound sense of emptiness, regardless of how much external success they achieve. Living authentically requires loving yourself enough to honor your true desires, values, and vision, even when they don't match what others expect from you. Authenticity is not about doing whatever you feel like in the moment or using your personality as an excuse for harmful behavior. True authenticity is about aligning your actions with your deepest values, expressing your genuine self in the world, and making choices that honor who you really are, rather than who you think you should be. This requires tremendous courage because it means risking disapproval, judgment, and rejection from people whose love and acceptance you may have spent your life trying to earn. The neuroscience of authenticity reveals something profound. When you live in alignment with your true self, your brain produces different chemicals than when you're pretending to be someone you're not. Authentic living activates the brain's reward centers, producing dopamine and serotonin that create feelings of satisfaction and well-being. Living inauthentically, on the other hand, creates chronic stress that floods your system with cortisol and other stress hormones, leading to anxiety, depression, and physical health problems. Your brain has specialized regions that monitor the consistency between your internal sense of self and your external behavior. When these are aligned, you experience what psychologists call psychological coherence, a state of internal harmony that supports mental health and peak performance. When they're misaligned, you experience cognitive dissonance, which creates internal tension and emotional turmoil that can manifest as everything from mild dissatisfaction to severe mental health issues. Creating an authentic vision for your life begins with getting clear about your core values the principles and beliefs that guide your decisions and define what matters most to you. Many people have never consciously identified their values because they've been so focused on meeting external expectations that they've lost touch with their internal compass. Your values aren't what you think you should care about or what others expect you to prioritize. They're what actually energizes you, motivates you, and makes you feel most alive. The process of identifying your authentic values requires honest self-reflection about what activities, environments, and experiences make you feel most like yourself. When do you feel most energized and alive? What situations make you lose track of time because you're so engaged? What achievements feel most meaningful to you, regardless of how others respond to them? What injustices or problems in the world genuinely upset you? What kind of impact do you want to have on other people's lives? These questions help you identify the values that drive your authentic self. Once you're clear about your values, you can begin creating a vision for your life that reflects who you really are, rather than who you think you should be. This vision should be specific enough to guide your decisions, but flexible enough to evolve as you grow and change. It should inspire you while also feeling achievable, challenge you while also honoring your natural strengths and interests. Many people avoid creating an authentic vision because they fear disappointing others or because their authentic desires seem impractical or unrealistic. You might discover that you don't want the corporate career your parents expect, that you're not interested in the traditional relationship timeline society promotes, or that your idea of success looks completely different from what your social circle values. Self-love gives you the courage to honor these authentic desires because you value your own happiness and fulfillment as much as other people's approval. Living authentically also requires what researchers call values-based decision-making, where you evaluate choices based on whether they align with your core values rather than whether they meet external expectations or provide immediate gratification. This doesn't mean being rigid or inflexible. It means having a clear internal compass that guides you when you face difficult decisions or competing priorities. One of the biggest challenges to authentic living is the fear of judgment from others. When you start living more authentically, some people in your life may react negatively because your changes challenge their own choices or because they're invested in keeping you in a role that serves their needs. They might accuse you of being selfish, irresponsible, or different. This resistance can be intense and emotionally difficult, especially when it comes from people whose opinions you value. But here's what you must understand. People who truly love and support you will celebrate your authentic self, even if they don't understand all your choices. People who only accept you when you're playing a role that serves them are revealing that their love is conditional on your compliance, not genuine appreciation for who you are. This distinction helps you identify which relationships support your growth and which ones limit it. Authentic living also requires developing what psychologists call internal validation, the ability to feel good about yourself based on your own assessment rather than external feedback. When you depend on others' approval to feel worthy, you must constantly modify your behavior to maintain that approval, which prevents you from expressing your authentic self. Internal validation means you can appreciate positive feedback from others without depending on it for your sense of worth. The practice of living authentically is gradual and requires patience with yourself as you navigate the transition from people-pleasing to self-honoring. You might start by making small choices that feel more authentic, expressing your genuine opinions in conversations, choosing activities that interest you rather than what others expect, or saying no to commitments that don't align with your values. As you build confidence in smaller areas, you can tackle bigger aspects of your life that may require more significant changes. Authentic living also involves accepting and expressing the full spectrum of who you are, including aspects of yourself that you may have hidden or suppressed. Many people create partial, edited versions of themselves that they present to the world, hiding their struggles, quirks, vulnerabilities, or unconventional interests. But authenticity means integrating all parts of yourself into a coherent whole, owning your complexity rather than trying to fit into simple categories. This integration process requires self-compassion because you'll discover aspects of yourself that you may not like or that don't fit your ideal self-image. You might realize you're more competitive than you thought, more sensitive than you're comfortable with, or that you have desires that seem shallow or contradictory. Loving yourself authentically means accepting these aspects of yourself without judgment while working to express them in healthy, constructive ways. The reward for living authentically is profound. You get to experience life as yourself rather than as a character you're playing. Your relationships become deeper and more meaningful because people are connecting with your real self rather than a facade. Your work becomes more fulfilling because you're expressing your genuine interests and values. Your decisions become easier because you have a clear internal compass to guide you. Most importantly, you develop unshakable self-respect that comes from knowing you're living in integrity with your true self. Chapter 13. The Power of Self-Investment. The most important investment you'll ever make is not in stocks, real estate, or business ventures. It's the investment you make in yourself, your knowledge, skills, health, relationships, and personal development. Yet most people spend more time researching which television to buy than they spend planning their personal growth. They'll invest thousands of dollars in their home, car, or vacation, but resist spending money on education, coaching, or experiences that could transform their entire life. This backward approach to investment keeps people stuck in cycles of mediocrity while wondering why their lives never improve significantly. Self-investment is not selfish. It's strategic. When you invest in yourself, you increase your capacity to create value in the world, earn higher income, build better relationships, and live a more fulfilling life. Every skill you develop, every limiting belief you overcome, every aspect of your health you improve, creates compound returns that benefit you for decades. Unlike financial investments that can lose value due to market conditions, investments in yourself create permanent assets that no one can take away from you. The psychology of self-investment reveals that people who consistently invest in their growth have fundamentally different beliefs about their potential and worth than those who don't. They see themselves as assets worth developing rather than as fixed entities with permanent limitations. They understand that their current situation is not their final destination, and that they have the power to continuously upgrade their knowledge, skills, and circumstances through intentional effort and investment. Your brain's neuroplasticity means that you can literally rewire your neural pathways through learning and practice, regardless of your age or background. Every new skill you learn creates new neural connections. Every limiting belief you overcome weakens old neural pathways while strengthening new ones. Every positive habit you develop reinforces neural patterns that support success and well-being. This means that self-investment isn't just about acquiring information. It's about physically changing your brain in ways that enhance your capabilities and potential. The compound effect of self-investment is extraordinary because improvements in one area of your life often create positive changes in other areas. When you invest in your physical health, you gain more energy for your career and relationships. When you develop emotional intelligence, you improve both your professional performance and personal connections. When you learn new skills, you increase your confidence and expand your opportunities. This interconnected nature of personal development means that every investment in yourself creates multiple returns. Most people avoid self-investment because of limiting beliefs about money, time, or their own potential. They might think they can't afford to invest in themselves, not realizing that they can't afford not to. They might believe they don't have time for personal development, not understanding that investing in themselves would actually give them more time by making them more efficient and effective. They might think they're too old to learn new things or that their situation is too difficult to improve, not recognizing that these beliefs themselves are what keep them stuck. The scarcity mindset that prevents self-investment is often rooted in childhood programming about money, learning, and personal worth. If you grew up in an environment where money was always tight, you might have internalized beliefs that spending money on yourself is wasteful or selfish. If you were told you weren't smart or capable, you might resist investing in education or skill development because you don't believe it will help. If you learned to always put others first, you might feel guilty about investing time and resources in your own growth. But here's the truth. Investing in yourself is one of the most generous things you can do for others. When you become the best version of yourself, you have more to offer in your relationships, career, and community. When you develop your skills and knowledge, you can contribute at higher levels. When you take care of your physical and mental health, you don't become a burden on others. When you work through your emotional issues and limiting beliefs, you stop unconsciously passing them on to people around you. Financial self-investment involves spending money on things that improve your long-term earning potential, well-being, or capabilities. This might include education, training programs, books, courses, coaching, therapy, or mastermind groups. Many people resist these investments because they don't see immediate returns. But the compound effect over time can be enormous. A course that costs a few $100s might teach you skills that increase your income by thousands of dollars per year for decades. Time investment is equally important and often more valuable than money. This involves spending time on activities that develop your capabilities rather than just consuming entertainment or staying busy with low-value activities. Reading books instead of watching television, exercising instead of scrolling social media, practicing new skills instead of complaining about your situation. Your time is your most precious resource because it's the only one you can't get more of. So investing it wisely is crucial for long-term success and fulfillment. Physical self-investment means taking care of your body through proper nutrition, regular exercise, adequate sleep, and preventive health care. Your physical health is the foundation for everything else in your life. When you feel good physically, you have more energy for work, relationships, and personal growth. When you're sick or constantly tired, everything else becomes more difficult. Investing in your physical health pays dividends in every other area of your life. Mental and emotional self-investment involves developing your psychological resources, emotional intelligence, mental resilience, stress management skills, and healthy thought patterns. This might include therapy, meditation practice, journaling, or working with a coach to overcome limiting beliefs and develop healthier relationship patterns. Many people resist this type of investment because it requires facing uncomfortable truths about themselves. But it's often the most transformative investment you can make. Skill development is another crucial form of self-investment. In today's rapidly changing world, the skills that got you where you are may not be sufficient to take you where you want to go. Continuously learning new skills keeps you relevant, increases your earning potential, and expands your options. This doesn't necessarily mean formal education. It might include online courses, workshops, mentorship, or simply practicing new abilities in your spare time. Relationship investment involves developing your ability to connect with others, communicate effectively, and build meaningful partnerships. This might include learning communication skills, attending networking events, joining professional organizations, or working with a relationship coach. Your network and relationships often determine your opportunities and quality of life more than any other factor. Experience investment means spending money on experiences that broaden your perspective, challenge your assumptions, or provide learning opportunities. Travel, workshops, conferences, and cultural events can expose you to new ideas and ways of thinking that transform your worldview and expand your possibilities. The key to effective self-investment is being strategic about where you focus your resources. Identify the areas where improvement would have the greatest impact on your life, and prioritize investments in those areas. If your limiting factor is health, invest in fitness and nutrition. If it's skills, invest in education and training. If it's mindset, invest in personal development and therapy. If it's relationships, invest in communication skills and networking. Remember that self-investment is not about instant gratification or quick fixes. It's about playing the long game and making choices that compound over time. The person you become through consistent self-investment will be capable of creating opportunities and solving problems that your current self can't even imagine. This is how you break free from the limitations of your current situation and create a life of continuous growth and expanding possibilities. Chapter 14. Maintaining momentum and avoiding regression. Change is easy, but sustaining change is one of the most challenging aspects of personal development. Most people experience cycles of growth and regression, making progress for weeks or months before falling back into old patterns and having to start over. This pattern isn't a sign of failure or lack of willpower. It's a natural part of how the brain processes and integrates new behaviors. Understanding the psychology and neuroscience of habit formation and regression can help you maintain momentum and create lasting transformation that doesn't require constant effort to sustain. Your brain is designed for efficiency, which means it prefers to operate on autopilot whenever possible. The neural pathways that support your current habits and behaviors have been strengthened through years or decades of repetition, making them the path of least resistance for your brain. When you try to change these patterns, you're literally fighting against your brain's natural tendency to revert to familiar, automatic behaviors. This is why willpower alone is insufficient for lasting change, and why most people struggle to maintain new behaviors even when they're motivated to change. The neuroscience of habit formation reveals that creating new neural pathways requires consistent repetition over extended periods. Research suggests that simple habits take an average of 66 days to become automatic, but complex behavioral changes can take much longer. During this formation period, your brain is essentially running two competing programs: the old pattern you're trying to change and the new pattern you're trying to establish. Any stress, fatigue, or emotional overwhelm can cause your brain to default back to the older, more established pathway. Understanding this process helps explain why change often feels difficult and why regression is common, especially during challenging periods. When you're stressed, tired, or emotionally triggered, your prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for conscious decision-making, goes offline, and your brain relies on more primitive, automatic responses. If your new behaviors haven't become fully automatic yet, this stress response will typically activate your old patterns, causing you to feel like you've failed when you're actually experiencing a normal part of the change process. Maintaining momentum requires developing what psychologists call implementation systems rather than relying on motivation or willpower. These are specific strategies, environments, and routines that make positive behaviors easier to maintain and negative behaviors more difficult to engage in. Instead of depending on your mood or energy level to make good choices, you create external structures that support your desired behaviors automatically. One of the most powerful implementation systems is environmental design. Changing your physical environment to support your goals and eliminate temptations. If you want to eat healthier, you stock your kitchen with nutritious foods and remove processed snacks. If you want to exercise regularly, you prepare your workout clothes the night before and remove barriers to getting to the gym. If you want to read more, you place books in visible locations and put your phone in another room. These environmental changes reduce the cognitive load required to make good choices and make positive behaviors more convenient than negative ones. Another crucial system is what researchers call identity-based habits, where you focus on becoming the type of person who naturally engages in the behaviors you want, rather than just trying to force yourself to act differently. Instead of saying, "I want to exercise more," you work on becoming someone who prioritizes their health and fitness. Instead of, "I want to be more confident," you focus on becoming someone who values themselves and speaks up for their needs. This identity-based approach creates intrinsic motivation that sustains behavior long after external motivation fades. Social environment plays a massive role in maintaining momentum. The people you spend time with influence your behaviors, beliefs, and standards more than you probably realize. If you're surrounded by people who support your growth, celebrate your progress, and maintain similar standards for themselves, maintaining positive changes becomes much easier. But if you're surrounded by people who undermine your efforts, make you feel guilty for changing, or model the old behaviors you're trying to leave behind, maintaining momentum becomes exponentially more difficult. This doesn't mean you need to abandon all your current relationships, but it does mean being strategic about who you spend time with and how much you allow others' opinions to influence your choices. You might need to find new social groups that support your growth. Limit time with people who consistently drain your energy or undermine your progress, and be more intentional about surrounding yourself with influences that reinforce the person you're becoming. Tracking your progress is essential for maintaining momentum because it provides objective feedback about your improvement and helps you identify patterns in your behavior. Many people abandon positive changes because they focus on daily fluctuations rather than long-term trends, or because they don't notice gradual improvements that compound over time. Regular tracking helps you see progress that might not be obvious day to day and provides motivation to continue when you feel like giving up. The tracking doesn't need to be complex or time-consuming. Simple daily check-ins about whether you engaged in your desired behaviors, weekly assessments of how you're feeling and what's working well, or monthly reviews of your overall progress can provide valuable data and motivation. The key is consistency rather than perfection, tracking your efforts rather than just your results. Preparing for setbacks and regression is paradoxically one of the best ways to prevent them. When you expect that you'll have difficult days, challenging periods, and occasional reversions to old patterns, you can create specific plans for how to respond to these situations. This might include identifying your personal triggers for regression, developing coping strategies for high-stress periods, and creating protocols for getting back on track when you've fallen off. Most people treat setbacks as evidence that they're failing or that change is impossible for them, which creates shame and often leads to abandoning their efforts entirely. But when you understand that setbacks are a normal part of the change process, you can respond with curiosity rather than judgment, learning from what happened and adjusting your approach rather than giving up completely. Building what researchers call keystone habits can help maintain momentum across multiple areas of your life simultaneously. These are behaviors that naturally trigger positive changes in other areas. For many people, regular exercise is a keystone habit that improves their energy, mood, sleep quality, and self-confidence, which then supports better nutrition, more productive work, and healthier relationships. Meditation, journaling, or morning routines can also function as keystone habits that create positive ripple effects throughout your day. Regular review and adjustment of your goals and systems is crucial for long-term maintenance. What works for you now might not work in 6 months as your circumstances, priorities, or challenges change. Instead of abandoning your efforts when your current approach stops working, you can adapt your strategies to fit your evolving situation. This requires honest self-assessment about what's working, what isn't, and what needs to be modified. The ultimate goal isn't perfection, but rather developing resilience and adaptability in your personal growth journey. When you have systems for maintaining momentum, strategies for handling setbacks, and the flexibility to adjust your approach as needed, you can sustain positive changes long-term while continuing to grow and evolve. This is how you break the cycle of starting over and create lasting transformation that becomes a natural part of who you are. Chapter 15. Living as your highest self. Your highest self is not a perfect version of you that exists in some distant future after you've fixed all your flaws and achieved all your goals. Your highest self is the version of you that emerges when you're operating from love instead of fear, when you're aligned with your deepest values instead of external expectations, and when you're expressing your authentic nature instead of hiding behind masks and personas. Living as your higher self is not a destination you reach, but a way of being you can choose in any moment, regardless of your circumstances. Most people postpone living as their highest self because they believe they need to become someone different first. They think they need to be more confident, more successful, more healed, or more evolved before they can step into their full potential. But this approach keeps you trapped in a cycle of endless preparation without ever actually becoming the person you're capable of being. Your highest self is available to you right now, not after you've completed some predetermined checklist of improvements. The neuroscience of self-actualization reveals that your brain has the capacity for continuous growth and evolution throughout your entire life. When you consistently choose thoughts, emotions, and behaviors that align with your highest self, you literally rewire your neural pathways to support this elevated way of being. Over time, what once required conscious effort becomes automatic, and operating from your highest self becomes your natural default rather than something you have to force. Your highest self emerges when you integrate all the concepts and practices we've explored throughout this journey. Unconditional self-love, emotional mastery, clear boundaries, authentic living, love-based action, resilience through self-compassion, and continuous growth through self-investment. These aren't separate skills to master individually. They're interconnected aspects of a unified way of being that supports your fullest expression. Living as your highest self requires what psychologists call conscious living, where you regularly pause to check in with yourself and ask whether your current thoughts, emotions, and actions align with who you want to be. This doesn't mean constantly monitoring yourself in an obsessive way, but rather developing an internal awareness that helps you course-correct when you notice you're operating from old patterns that no longer serve you. One of the hallmarks of your highest self is the ability to hold paradox without needing to resolve it. You can be confident while remaining humble, strong while staying vulnerable, independent while valuing connection, ambitious while being content with where you are. Most people think they need to choose between seemingly opposite qualities, but your highest self integrates these apparent contradictions into a complex, multifaceted way of being. Your highest self is naturally generous because it operates from abundance rather than scarcity. When you're secure in your own worth and potential, you can celebrate others' success without feeling threatened, offer help without expecting something in return, and share your knowledge and resources freely because you trust that more good things are always available. This generosity isn't forced or performed. It's a natural overflow of your internal state of abundance. Living as your highest self also means embracing your role as a leader, regardless of your formal position or title. Leadership isn't about controlling or dominating others. It's about inspiring people through your example, creating positive change in your sphere of influence, and taking responsibility for your impact on the world around you. When you live as your highest self, you naturally inspire others to do the same, creating ripple effects that extend far beyond your immediate circle. Your highest self has a clear sense of purpose that goes beyond personal gain or comfort. This purpose doesn't have to be grandiose or world-changing, but it should reflect your desire to contribute something meaningful to the world. Whether you express this through your career, relationships, creative pursuits, or service to others, living with purpose gives your life meaning and direction that external achievements alone cannot provide. The practice of living as your highest self involves developing what researchers call meta-cognition, the ability to think about your thinking. You become aware of your thought patterns, emotional reactions, and behavioral tendencies without being completely identified with them. This creates space between who you are and what you're experiencing, allowing you to choose your responses rather than react automatically from old programming. This doesn't mean becoming detached or emotionally disconnected. Your highest self feels everything fully, but isn't controlled by temporary feelings. You can experience anger without becoming consumed by rage, feel fear without being paralyzed by anxiety, and go through sadness without believing you're fundamentally broken. This emotional fluency allows you to use your feelings as information and motivation while maintaining your center and perspective. Your highest self also embodies what spiritual traditions call presence, the ability to be fully engaged with whatever is happening in the current moment, rather than being lost in thoughts about the past or future. This presence allows you to show up fully in your relationships, work, and daily activities, creating deeper connections and more meaningful experiences. Living as your highest self requires ongoing commitment because growth is not a linear process. You'll have moments when you operate from your highest self and moments when you fall back into old patterns. The key is treating these fluctuations as information rather than evidence of failure. When you notice you're not operating from your highest self, you can simply recommit to your values and choose differently in the next moment. Your highest self is also constantly evolving. As you grow and change, your understanding of your potential expands, and new levels of expression become available. What seemed like your highest self a year ago might feel limited compared to who you're capable of being now. This is natural and beautiful, a sign that you're continuing to grow rather than becoming stagnant. The ultimate invitation is to stop waiting for permission, perfect conditions, or complete healing before you step into your highest self. You don't need anyone else's approval to live authentically, love yourself unconditionally, or express your full potential. You don't need to wait until you feel ready, because readiness comes from action, not preparation. You don't need to have it all figured out because living as your highest self is an ongoing practice, not a final achievement. Your highest self is calling you to step forward boldly, to love yourself fiercely, and to level up continuously, not because you're not enough as you are, but because you're capable of so much more than you've allowed yourself to imagine. This is your invitation to stop playing small, stop making excuses, and stop waiting for someday. Your highest self is available right now, in this moment, waiting for you to choose it. The question is not whether you're capable of this transformation. The question is whether you love yourself enough to claim it. The journey of loving yourself enough to level up never truly ends because there's no ceiling to human potential. Every level you reach reveals new possibilities for growth, contribution, and self-expression. This isn't a burden. It's the most exciting aspect of being human. You get to continue becoming more of who you truly are for your entire life. The only question that remains is, are you ready to love yourself enough to begin?